Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. Folks, we have made it to Thanksgiving, week of Turkey Day, which means we are getting down to the nitty-gritty of the bracket. It will soon be December, and we are just weeks away from crowning state champions. We have 3 teams still alive in that chase. We had some teams get eliminated before they could get to Thanksgiving, unfortunately. And we will recap what happened with those teams. We will preview the games coming up in the region semifinal round here on the podcast. We will do what we always do. We will start from the top. We will work our way to the bottom. And we will cover it all for the teams that at least made the second round. And we will start at 4A Division II Region 2. And that is where the Van Alstyne Panthers took on the defending champion Carthage Bulldogs and came away on the wrong side of a 49-7 game. We said going in this was going to be a tough matchup again this season. Unfortunately, the bracket setup was not kind if you were the runner-up or the third-place finisher in 5-4A Division 2, because that meant you were on the side of the bracket with Carthage. And unfortunately, for the second straight year, Van Alstyne is unable to get to the third round, losing against Carthage, this time by that 49-7 score. Only 14-0 after the first quarter. That's a respectable start, all things considered, but down 35-0 at halftime, down 49-0 before getting on the board with a Weston Johnston 16-yard touchdown pass to Jackson Skinner. Obviously, tough sledding in this one for the Panthers. Barely 150 yards of offense. Weston Johnson, 11 of 26 completions. Had 2 interceptions with that touchdown, 96 yards. He also led the team in rushing with 15 carries for 45 yards. Brady Carson, 5 catches for 51 yards. Skinner had the 2 catches for 24 yards. So Van Alstyne has its season come to an end at 7-4. And again, like we talked about in the preview, you try to do as best as you can based on the bracket. We'll talk about that with some other teams as well. But again, to finish as the runner-up in their district for another year in a row, beating everybody in the district except for Aubrey, being in the second round for the third straight year, showing that they are competitive since they've moved up from the 3A level. But obviously getting that roadblock there, especially the last 2 years with Carthage, unable to get to the third round for the first time since 2011. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with realignment. Aubrey is leaving. They will be going Division 1. And so if that is the only real change to this district, I would say that you would have to have Van Alstyne as next in line to be the favorite. And obviously that would put them on potentially a different path when it comes to who they would face in the playoffs. But I think again, you're probably talking about a Carthage team that is riding a 28-game win streak, is halfway to its goal of repeating and winning a third title in 4 years. If that does come to pass, again, there's no shame in saying we just met the best team in 4A Division 2, earlier than we would have hoped. If you go to the other side of the bracket, maybe you can make a run to the region semifinals or even the region final and play them there. So, but again, another good season for the Panthers. They'll be in sort of a similar mode to last year, where they lose some key guys on both sides of the ball, and you didn't know what to expect from them this year. And again, they find themselves in a good spot. So got some playmakers coming back. Like I said, we will have to see what realignment does to that district for sure. But I would think at the very least you probably pencil them in for a playoff spot. And like I said, if that district stays the same, I would imagine that a lot of people are going to view them as the favorite. Going into next season. And of course, we won't know what their non-district schedule looks like to kind of project the win total or anything like that. But But in a good spot, and unfortunately just the luck of the bracket got them again this year in 4A Division II, Region 2. Down to the 3A level, some mixed results. We'll talk about the teams that were eliminated. We lost both of the Division 1 teams this week. We'll start out in Region 1 with that matchup in the area round between Whitesboro and Bushland. And Whitesboro unable to pull off an upset for the second week in a row as Bushland advances with the 60-19 win. Again, this is a game, early on, both teams trying to feel each other out, see how things are going to go. Whitesboro's only down 14-7 after the first quarter, so you're hanging in there. You're feeling pretty good about that. And then Bushland scores 2 touchdowns and a field goal in the second quarter, and then the first 2 touchdowns in the third quarter to break things open and to eliminate Whitesboro. Again, this was another game we talked about. Whitesboro comes in with a 6-5 record. After beating Jim Ned in the first round. Bushland came in at 10-1, and it was going to take another one of those upset bids to get to the third round. Unfortunately, the run of region final appearances for Whitesboro has come to an end. In this one, Clay Hermes, 14 of 37 passing for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. Brett Donaldson, 4 catches for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mason Scarborough had 2 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown. Carter Sluter, 5 catches for 59 yards as well. Colt Fagan led the way rushing with 10 carries for 49 yards. Unfortunately, Whitesboro had to play without its starting running back Max Parker, who got hurt in the bi-district game against Jim Ned, and obviously that was going to make things even tougher to not have him available in the backfield. Whitesboro finishes with 26 carries for 77 yards in that regard. But again, you had an offense that in Bushland that we talked about explosive they could be, balanced that they were, putting up over 500 yards. But again, you have a really good run, for a Whitesboro team that a lot of people, I went out and did the preview of this game after the Bearcats beat Jim Ned, and I'm sure a lot of people were surprised that Whitesboro was able to beat Jim Ned. There might have been some people considering the large senior class that graduated and kind of spearheaded those deep runs the last 2 years. That Whitesboro might not even make the playoffs, and especially in a district where we've talked about all season long. You had Brock, you had Paradise. Both of those teams are still playing, and there's a pretty decent chance that they could meet in the region final. So 4-3A has been a very, very strong district in this region. It has been the dominating force now for the last 3 years, with multiple teams among the last 4 and especially the last couple of years with Whitesboro and Brock being the last 2 standing. It's the best. It's been the best district in the region. And so with Brock being Brock and Paradise bringing back so many people from last year, and they were, like I said, they were a top 10 team whose only loss has been to Brock. That for Whitesboro to get third, for Whitesboro to do what it did, getting to the second round, I'm sure that surprised a lot of people, considering the kids that they lost to graduation. And they're another team that's going to be affected by realignment. We already know that Brock is moving up to 4A Division 2 in the next realignment because they had already had the numbers even before they got turned in. We knew that was going to happen. The question is going to be who else gets moved around. I would be interested to see if Whitesboro potentially comes back into Region 2 and maybe gets put in a district with a Pottsboro, as things start to shift around because of people either moving up or moving down. It's going to be interesting to see what the cutoffs are and what people turn in. But we know Brock is leaving, so at the very least, if the district stays the same, I think next year could be a free for all in this district. If it's just minus Brock, because Paradise is going to lose a lot of kids to graduation. Obviously, there's some key losses here at Whitesboro. The top two receivers in Donaldson and Sluter are going to graduate. Quarterback at Hermes is going to graduate. Running back at Parker is going to graduate. But again, we saw this with this year's group with the new quarterback. Parker moved into a main role at running back instead of just getting carries as a 1A 1B type of guy. So I don't know who, if this district were to stay the same, I don't know who the favorite would be. It may be Whitesboro are competing for that district title. So there's a lot of moving pieces, I think, with this coming realignment for a lot of the teams in Grayson County, who are going to be interested to see where they get placed or where they might have ended up in a different world. But we know Brock is leaving, and I think that's a huge sigh of relief for everybody across the state. And we'll just see what else happens in terms of cutoffs and how they want to how big do they want to make districts. Obviously, this is a bigger district than some of the others at this level. So, but again, all things considered, if you would have told Whitesboro before the season, you're going to lose all the guys that you lost, all these 3-year starters, but you're still going to make the second round of the playoffs, I think they would have taken that. I think you don't want to call it a rebuilding year or anything like that, but considering all the losses and the guys that had to plug in, and a lot of the young guys, when we talk about them at the start of next season and we say, here's a bunch of sophomores that are starting, and a handful of them got playing time this year as freshmen, or this guy is a junior and he got significant playing time as a sophomore. I think that's what we're going to see with Whitesboro going forward, and then the question is going to be, how does the realignment handle them? The other 3A Division I team in Pottsboro, their season comes to an end, 56-42 against Grandview. So this has obviously turned into a little bit of a rivalry lately. These teams are meeting in the playoffs, and in consequential games. Obviously, none bigger than state championship game in 2019. But they meet again, and this was a wild one. It was sort of a, can you top this? Okay, you just scored, so we're gonna score. It was 35-35 at halftime. Big plays back and forth. Each team scored on via a turnover. In Grandview's case, it was an actual fumble return. Pottsboro returned a fumble recovery into a touchdown drive that happened real quick, and it was literally like I said, it was literally back and forth. Grandview scores, Pottsboro scores in 9 seconds. Then Pottsboro scores, Grandview scores in 30 seconds. It was just Grandview scores, Pottsboro scores in less than a minute. It was just so back and forth in the first half. It was literally like you look up and somebody's scoring again. So it was 35-35 at halftime, and you're like, how high is this going to go? We're already at 35-35. And then both teams made some defensive adjustments. Obviously, second half only had 4 touchdowns total scored. And unfortunately, Pottsboro only got one of them. We went to the fourth quarter tied at 42. But Grandview scored twice in the fourth quarter to win that game. And the second touchdown with a little under 3 minutes left came after Pottsboro went for it on fourth down at their own 1-yard line. Even though they had all the timeouts, they could have punted. Tried to get a stop try to at least force Grandview to pick up a first down or two. But they went for it on their 1 yard line. They didn't get it. The next play, Grandview scores to make it the 2-score game, and that's how it ended up. But again, just up and down, back and forth. Both teams sort of they have opposite mirror numbers. Grandview ran for 154 yards. Pottsboro threw for 150. Grandview threw for 298. Pottsboro ran for 343. Pottsboro had a couple turnovers. Grandview had one as well. And it was a back and forth game for sure. Major McBride, of course, leads Pottsboro like he always does. 32 carries for 279 yards and 4 touchdowns. He finished his career with he got past 6,000 yards in his career in this one. He also had the 100th rushing touchdown of his career in this one as well to close out what's been a stellar. He's been a starter for 3 years. He had a cup of coffee as a freshman, but he's basically gotten better every year. Had over 2,500 yards and 46 touchdowns rushing. So it was just a spectacular game, and it looked like he was gonna carry them again, but they come up just short. Caden Humphrey, 7 of 16 passing for 150 yards. Did have a couple touchdown passes in this one. Had a 37-yarder to Xavier Brady. Had a 56-yarder to Evan Roden. And he also ran 18 times for 80 yards for Pottsboro. And again, so Pottsboro has their season come to an end. I would say a tough finish, just because of the fact that had such a really good start. Unfortunately, they lose to Winsboro to drop out of that tie for first place. Then they lose to Mount Vernon in the last game of the regular season that would have decided second or third place. And then, of course, they lose this game here to finish 9-3. So a tough finish after starting. I guess that would have been 8-0 or 7-0. I guess 8-0, and then to lose to Winsboro, and then to get a win, and then to lose. I guess that would have been 7-0 because obviously they won in the first round of the playoffs. But yeah, a tough finish. And Mount Vernon ended up getting beat by Malakoff. That's who Grandview was going to face. And Winsboro was still playing. So again, you've got 2 of your 3 losses are still playing. So it's hard when you face teams of that caliber and you come up just short. Obviously coming up just short in the Mount Vernon game, just coming up short in this one. It has to be it's a tough finish. But again, it's a still a good season. I know it's hard to look back and say that, considering you have bigger goals. You thought you could have gotten to the third round. I thought this game was a 50-50 sort of game. You could if Pottsboro would have won this game 56-42, I totally would have believed that. It's just that unfortunately, a 10-1 team and a 9-2 team had to play in the second round. And that's just the cruelty of the bracket sometimes. This could have easily been a third round game or even a region final game, depending on the bracket. So Whitesboro and Pottsboro get eliminated at the 3A Division I level, and then down in the 3A Division II level, we had a split. We had a split of the teams in 3A Division II. Gunner wins and Bells comes up short in their matchup. So we'll touch on Bells. So they played Jacksboro. 45-6 was the final there as they lose. Again, you look at the first quarter, you're down 10-0, and then things kind of got away from them in the second quarter. They're down 31-6 at halftime, and it was a grind for Bells. They got 256 yards rushing, and it took 56 carries to get there. Easton Helgren had 18 carries for 108 yards. Bryson Thompson 14 carries for 85 yards, and he had the touchdown. Jackson Brown chipped in 11 carries for 48 yards. Hayden Allen, we talked about last week. He only had the 2 carries for 10 yards. Did not have a carry in this one, although he did punt. I thought this I did not see coming. I will be honest. I wouldn't have been surprised if Jacksboro would have won. They are undefeated. They're having a great season. I would have thought it would have been a shootout. I don't. I know you shouldn't play the transitive property game. But to look at Bells beating Callisburg 49-22, and then to watch Callisburg lose 2 weeks ago to Jacksboro 51-40, and then for Bells to lose like this, that my brain can't do the math on that. If you would have told me Jacksboro would have won or Bells would have won, I think I probably would have said it would have been a shootout. It would have been like that Pottsboro game. It would have been 56-42 or 49-35 or something like that. I didn't think it was going to be a defensive game, and I certainly didn't think it would be this lopsided. So Bells finishes 9-2. They lose to a team that is currently 12-0. They lost to Gunner to open district play, who is also 12-0. If Gunner and Jacksboro both win this week, they're going to play each other in the region final. They'll both be 13-0, and one of them is going to lose. And unfortunately, if you're Bells, you sit here and go, we beat everybody else that we played, and we beat basically everybody very handily. And it just so happened that we had to play perhaps the 2 best teams in the region. One of them is obviously in our district, and the other one, they were on our side of the bracket. And those games were not close, but I don't know what you can do. If those are your only 2 losses, like I said, you just tip your hat and say, we just lost to the 2 best teams. I have a feeling, Jacksboro is probably. I don't know if they're going to beat Holiday. I think they're favored. I would love to see Gunner Jacksboro. I think that's intriguing. And we'll talk about Gunner here in a second. But obviously, disappointing for Bells. They were trying to get to the 3rd round again. If they did, they were going to have a rematch with Holiday again to try to get over that hump and get to the region final for the first time. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. But they win 9 games again. That's the fifth year in a row they've won at least 9 games. And unfortunately, they just fell short of getting as far as they have the last couple of years. But again, you look at the roster. There's a lot of guys that are going to be back. Just looking in the backfield, they went young at quarterback with Easton Brandon, who's going to be back. Helgren's going to be back. Thompson's going to be back. They had some young guys get some time, like Jackson Brown. That got a taste of varsity level this year, and I think again, we'll see what realignment does with them. I don't think Gunner and Howe are going to leave. I think they're going to just miss going into 3A Division 1. But we won't know until we see the cutoffs for sure. But I have a feeling Leonard is leaving. I think it could be an interesting. We could see a totally different district. And it could be really close to happening, or it could be really close to not happening. So that's going to be interesting. And of course, Bells has been the solid second seed in this district since it was implemented a couple years ago, to where what we've talked about, Gunner beats everybody, Bells beats everybody but Gunner. So I think at the minimum that's sort of the feeling going forward. And then can you find a way to break through and get to a region final? But I would expect Bells to again be in the mix. Again, I think it's safe to. I don't want to say it's safe to say, but it's pretty obvious they probably lost to the second best team in the region. I'm sure they would have loved to have a better showing. Unfortunately, didn't happen for the Panthers as they finished, like I said, at 9-2, and their two opponents are 24-0. So it's hard to feel anything other than what are you going to do when you're in that situation if you're the Bills Panthers. So another really good season for them, and we'll see what they get in realignment, and then like I said, they'll probably be viewed as if not one of the 8 best teams in the region, or they would, they're definitely in that next tier, based on what the region looks like next year for sure. The team, we'll get to a team that is actually playing this week, and of course that's the Gunner Tigers, and they have a 3A Division II Region 2 semifinal against Comanche. Gunner, of course, 12-0 after they won 83-6. Against Wichita Falls City View. Comanche is 8-4. They won 41-21 against Scotty Rosser. So it's hard to win 75-0 in the first round and have a bigger margin of victory in the second round. But somehow Gunner found a way to do that. They were up 20-0 after the first quarter, 48-0 at halftime. And the only two negatives in this game, if you want to really nitpick, and we are picking nits when we're talking about these two things, is number one, Gunner actually allowed a touchdown. I know, hard to believe. So their streak of 5 straight shutouts is over. They were trying to go for 6 in a row. Unfortunately, in the third quarter, City View put together pretty good little drive. They actually moved the ball pretty well. Coach Fizell said, hey, they had, as he said it, they have some cats, and they were able to put some stuff together, and they had a good drive, and they hit him for a touchdown pass, and give City View credit, because it's been like 6 weeks since anybody has been able to do that. So that's a negative. Preston Tarpley's extra point streak was blocked, or was ended. He had a kick blocked, his third one of the game. And looking on the replay, the video, probably should have been a penalty, based on the way the guy leaped over the snapper and used him for leverage, and that should be a penalty. But that is a trivial thing. So unfortunately, that streak comes to an end. And obviously, the disappointing thing about that is he had a good chance to set the all-time record for consecutive extra points made. He did move to number 2 on the all-time list. So that's nice, and it's nice to be in the record book after moving to third. Earlier in, just a couple games ago, that was nice. And he had a long way to go to get to first place. Let me find the numbers here. So he had made 165 straight extra points. The record is 205. So he was 40 away. So if you consider they make a couple, they go a couple another rounds, at least 3, as everybody thinks they might, at the very least. Early next season, he would have had a chance to get there. But Alito's Chance Navarez is going to hold the record for that. And I guess if there's a third thing, unfortunately, the injury bug rebit again this week. Defensive back / wide receiver Colin Peacock came back from a broken collarbone at the start of the playoffs. He got injured in the Brock game, missed the Gladewater game and all of district play, with the hopes of being able to come back in the playoffs and help this run in the playoffs, and made it through last week okay, or the first round okay, and unfortunately it broke it, and it's just one of those freak things. They cleared him, obviously. He was good to go, and Unfortunately, that stinks. So those are the negatives. Obviously, you score 83 points. There's a lot of positives. Walker Overman, 6 of 9 passing for 129 yards and 3 touchdowns. Did have an interception. Cannon Lemberg, 4 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. Peacock's lone catch was a 38-yard touchdown. Boston Stanridge, 2 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. Brock Body, 8 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cade Dodson's only carry was a 51-yard touchdown. And then the standard second half guys making the most of their potentially 1 or 2 carries. Dylan Tokars with a touchdown run, Easton Overman with a touchdown run, and in the fourth quarter, Parker Alleman and Blake Bolin both with touchdown runs as well. This is another one of those games you look at the box score, and I'll count them up for you with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 different ball carriers in this one for Gunner. And it was, you know what to say, it was a typical Gunner game for the past 2 months. They set the playoff record for points by the program for the second straight week. And they just continue to roll. And so now they're going to face Comanche. And I don't want to say Comanche feels confident in themselves. But I will point out that when they won last week, they handed Scurry Rosser their first loss. So they have played the role of underdog very well, especially last week. Winning by 3 touchdowns against an undefeated team is not easy. This is the first time that Comanche's in the region semifinals since 2018. That was the last time they actually played Gunner and lost in the region semifinals to Gunner by a lopsided score of 53-14. And it's going to be interesting to see if this is the first real test for Gunner. Now, I may regret saying that this may be the first actual challenger for the Tigers in the bracket at noon on Friday at Choctaw Stadium in Arlington, which is the former Globe Life Park where the Texas Rangers used to play. But I think just kind of looking at Comanche, I think they have some pieces that could be a problem. They have a good running game. They have a player who is committed to Baylor as a defensive back, but he also plays wide receiver. They have an offense that can do a little bit. I don't think it's obvious. I don't think it's going to be enough to win the game. But I would like to think that especially compared to the first 2 rounds, this is a step up in competition. Now, I could be talking to you next week and saying Gunner wins 77-14, and I guess that's better than 83-6. But I just think that there's an opportunity here for Comanche to kind of put up a little bit of a fight. They've scored at least 40 points in for the last 5 games. Their losses are to really good teams. Jacksboro, they only lost to by 8 in district play. They're still playing, and obviously that could be a rematch in the region final if they're able to beat Gunner. Albany, who is the defending 2A Division II champion and is still playing and is undefeated, and Tolar, who is still alive as well. They only have 1 loss, and they could end up winning their region in 2A Division I, and we'll talk about them in a second because that's a potential opponent for somebody at the 2A level. So you there's 1 loss that doesn't make sense. The Millsap loss, because Millsap went 5-5, and so that doesn't make any sense to me. But 3 of their 4 losses, you can say, were against really good teams who have a combined 34-1 record right now, or something crazy, something along those lines. to where they could be a problem. Could be totally wrong. I think Gunner's obviously going to win. I think, Gunner's the best team in the region. But I also think Gunner would like to see, a nice challenge, because things are going to get progressively harder. They're going to play the Holiday. The winner of this plays the Holiday Jacksboro winner. If it is Jacksboro, I'm leaning towards them as a favorite over Holiday. I think that's going to be a step up in competition, and then of course, Canadian is waiting potentially in the state semifinals again. So, I may be totally wrong, but I think obviously Comanche is definitely a step up over these first two opponents. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's only going to get progressively tougher. But again, Gunner's if Gunner continues to blow people out, I don't think that's a surprise either. So we'll know early Friday afternoon, as this 3A Division II Region 2 semifinal happens at noon on Friday at Choctaw Stadium in Arlington. And the two teams left to talk about, they have games this week. One of them was expected, and I don't know if the other one was expected, but I'm sure while Collinsville expected to be here, maybe Tioga expected to be here within their own program. And so we'll start with them as we work our way down. And in the 2A Division II Region 2 bracket, Tioga comes away not just with a win, but with a dominating win, 64-14 over Valley Mills. And so they have a 2A Division I Region 2 semifinal against Marlin at 1 p.m. on Friday at Crowley. Tioga now 9-3. Marlin is 10-2. They won 30-28 against Coleman. And from Tioga's standpoint, okay, so we'll go back to the beginning of the playoffs. So we didn't know what Tioga Hamilton was going to look like because Hamilton beat Tioga last year. I know it's different kids. Obviously Tioga's going to do different coach, different scheme, but you never know. So they win that game, and then they come to this week in the area round, and they're facing Valley Mills. And Valley Mills is coming off a win over an Axtell team that was ranked number 10 in the state. And you sit there and go, well, if you can beat a top 10 team, a ranked team, whatever, you're probably pretty good. And this game was over in the middle of the second quarter. It was 16-0 after the first quarter. And then Tioga scores 3 times in the first 4+ minutes of the second quarter, and it's 37-0 before Valley Mills gets on the board. Now they got on the board twice at that point, so it's 37-14 at halftime. But then obviously they don't score again. Tioga scores 3 times in the third quarter to really blow things open. And they go on to win by 50. And you look at it and you say, Hayden Hilliard, 21-37 passing for 311 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he also ran for a score. Austin Norwood, 5 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Slade Babbitt, 6 catches for 61 yards. Johnny Dorpinghouse, 4 catches for 55 yards. Jake David had a touchdown catch. Sam Mott had a touchdown catch. Jonathan Hernandez, 7 carries for 98 yards and a touchdown. Rocky Urich added a touchdown run as well. And just totally clicking. Tioga forces 3 turnovers. Valley Mills does throw the ball around a ton. They get 267 yards passing, but they had 28 carries for 40 yards. And in the third quarter, that was a lot worse than as a yards per carry. There were some late runs that kind of pumped that number up a little bit, but Valley Mills could not do anything on the ground for about at least 3 quarters, maybe 3.5 quarters in this game. And so here you have Tioga. They hadn't won a playoff game since moving up to 11-man after making the six-man semifinals in 2016. Hadn't won a playoff game. Now they've got 2. And now they're playing a Marlin team that, I mean, I think this could be a 50-50 game. I see no reason why Tioga can't win this game. Marlin barely won last week against Coleman. They almost blew a 30-6 lead in the third quarter. They had to stop a 2-point conversion to keep Coleman from forcing overtime. And you look at, Marlin, which, obviously when you get to this point in the playoffs, a lot of times at the lower levels, you're seeing people you've never seen before. So I didn't know where Marlin was, didn't know anything about him. Looked up their scores and obviously everything. So they won their district. Obviously, they only have the 2 losses. One of them is a forfeit. So they had some academic situations the first week of the season. It made some news around the state. When I looked it up, I was like, why do they have a loss that's a forfeit the first week? And then I Googled it, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Obviously, that feels like a lifetime ago, back in the first week of August. And then they lost to Mart the next week, 48-8. And Mart's undefeated. Mart is, if they're not a favorite to win, they're always a favorite to win. They're a perennial program. So throw out one loss because it's a forfeit. We don't know how they would have done. So they start 0-2 and they've won 10 games in a row since. Now, here's the interesting thing for me. So they've won 10 games since then. However, when you look at their scores, you see they won a game by 7. They won a game by 3. They won a game by 7, which was against Valley Mills 28-21 in district play. They just beat Coleman by 2. So you have half of their games could easily have been losses. Now, you give them credit because they won them, and wins are wins. But if I'm looking at it and I say you only, and the Valley Mills game, was to end district play. So that was only 3 weeks ago. That's not like it was the first district game and maybe they've gotten better since then, or however you want to couch it. That game was played the first Friday in November. And it was a game where, it was pretty, it took, this is a game that was tied in the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth quarter before, Marlin went ahead 28-21. So if you're even with Valley Mills and Tioga just beat Valley Mills by 50, I've got to think you've got a good shot. And so again, I went into last week thinking, maybe Valley Mills had the upper hand because of who they beat. Obviously, Axtell was not that, I don't want to downplay Valley Mills or Axtell, but obviously that did not seem like a top 10 team to lose to a team that would, again, turn around and lose by 50. So maybe that was just a fluke or something. But if you're looking at the common opponents, I sit here and go, why can't Tioga go and win this game on Friday afternoon? They're playing well. They're believing. The defense is playing well in all the games that they've won. They have not scored. They have not allowed more than 20 points. Again, this week they only allowed 14, and both of those touchdowns came on fourth down plays that Valley Mills had to go for it because they were down 37-0. They had nothing to lose. And so literally, if you make 2 stops there, they pitch a shutout. That's how that's how dominating this game was. You literally comes down to 2, potentially 2 plays for them to win this game 64-0. And so I think they've got a really good shot. Either way, it's obviously been a great success for the first year under Coach Birdwell to get to this point. And I'm sure they're saying why not. He's talked with getting ready for this week of, they put on the board 11-24 back when he was hired, and they've had that there and they've focused on that to say, hey, we wanted to be able to play after Thanksgiving. They got there, and now it's why not play in December? let's stretch this out another week or two. The winner's going to play the Tolar Italy winner. That's why I mentioned Tolar before. I assume it's going to be Tolar in the region final for the winner of this game. And obviously that would be a rematch for Marlin. And we already know that they did not handle that very well the first meeting in non-district play. So it's going to be interesting. This is a game I'm going to be at. I'm going to watch Tyrell again for the second week in a row. And I'm really interested to see what happens because I think there's a chance that this thing could go, at least another round, and they're playing in December. And then the last game to talk about is in 2A Division 2 Region 2, and that, of course, is the Collinsville Pirates, who have their region semifinal game against Roscoe. This is at 2 p.m. on Friday at Springtown. Collinsville comes in at 11-1 after they beat Miles 69-21, and Roscoe beat Windthorst 50-22. So this is not this was a potential rematch. Collinsville Windthorst last year in a really close game that Collinsville had to pull out to advance to the region final. And I don't know if some people were surprised that Roscoe with one, because they're now 10-2, so they were 9-2 going into that game. I think just the lopsided nature of that game is what was surprising, that they won as handily as they did. And so here we are with Collinsville. Again, much like I say with Gunner every week, they just do what they do, which is put up a lot of points, make some plays defensively, and it's a lopsided score. In this case, it was 62-7 at halftime. There were a ton of turnovers, mostly interceptions. Carter Scott returned 145 yards for a score. And then the offense just, again, puts up over 650 yards of offense. They again do most of it through the air. Logan Jenkins, 27 of 33 passing for 443 yards and 6 touchdowns. His last one of the game was his 60th of the season. And so he's continuing to climb up the charts on a statewide level for career touchdowns, for passing touchdowns in a season, passing yards in a career. He's getting into those top 15, top 10 lists, and we'll see how high he can go with at least one more game coming. And again, they spread it around like they always do. Carter, in addition to the interception return, Carter Scott with 3 catches for 153 yards and a touchdown. Colin Barnes, 9 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. Reed Patterson, 2 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for a score as well. Rylan Newman, 7 catches for 36 yards and a touchdown. Lyndon Carpenter had a touchdown catch as well. Jenkins had 7 carries for 62 yards and ran for 2 scores. In addition to his passing day, Parker Wells led the way with rushing 6 carries for 77 yards. And they're just rolling along. To get back to this point, I think was expected. I think they expect to win and get back to the region final. The winner of this game would play the winner of Albany-Munster in that region final. Obviously, the defending champions are expected to advance, and so that would be a rematch. If it's a rematch either way for Collinsville, because obviously Munster's from their district, and that's who they finished in front of with the undefeated district title. But I think obviously before the season, if you would have told me that Albany and Collinsville were playing in the region final again, I would believe it. They're pretty stinking close to doing that as well. And again, they're just rolling along. The 69 points, playoff record for points for Collinsville. They've scored at least 60 points 3 weeks in a row. And I'm interested. I'm interested to see what Roscoe can do, only from the standpoint of to beat Winthrop as bad as they did, it says something. And in talking with Coach Patterson about this game, he said, here's what Roscoe has. They're a running team. They got a big running back. They've got a big H-back guy who gets carries. They get some big offensive linemen. So if I'm Roscoe and I'm looking at this matchup and how do I find a way to win, it's going to be pound the ball. It's going to be shorten the game, take as much time off the clock, limit Collinsville's possessions, and that's how we get out of here with a win. So is again, we're at that point where everybody's good. There's only 16 teams left. And you look at all these records, like I said, Collinsville's playing somebody who's 10-2. Tioga's playing someone who's 10-2. Gunner's playing someone who's 8-4. But we looked at 3 of those 4 losses, and they're very understandable. So everybody's good. So I don't know how longer, again, much like with Gunner, how long can Collinsville, they beat somebody 62-0 to open the playoffs, then they win 69-21. At some point, it's going to get a little tougher, and I could totally see if Roscoe comes out and they don't have to score on the drive, but if you pick up a couple first downs, you can burn 5 minutes of a quarter. You can burn maybe 7 minutes. You can burn almost all of a quarter if you pick up the first down on a couple third downs and you milk the entire play clock, and you look up and it's the middle of the second quarter and you've only got 2 possessions or something, and it's a tie game at 7, or you're only up 14-7 because you scored on both of your possessions, but that's the only ones you got, and there's 4 minutes till halftime. That's how underdogs win games. So I could totally see that happening based on what Coach Patterson said about the strength of what Roscoe is bringing to the table. But I fully expect Collinsville, to be playing Albany and trying to get revenge on that loss in the region final last year. So we'll see. I think we've got 3 games. I think we could easily see 3 teams advancing. And how great would that be to have 3 teams playing to be region champs, and be just a couple weeks away from playing at AT&T Stadium for a championship. I know a lot of people expect Gunner to be there. They will have a tough test if they get to the semifinals against Canadian. Collinsville, if they get to next week, is going to have a very tough rematch with Albany, and Tioga's got I think two tough opponents. But again, at this time, they say there's no turkeys after Thanksgiving. Everybody is good. Everybody earned their spot here. You had to win twice to get to this point. And odds are you probably beat 2 pretty good teams to get here in a lot of cases. So we'll see who can get to the region final. And whatever happens, like I said at the beginning of the season, we will do the podcast until the last team is standing. And whether that's next week, at state, whatever it is, we'll keep talking about the games until there are no games left to talk about. So I think it's supposed to be a little colder this week, and it's good, but it's going to be during the day, so that may help. But obviously, be safe traveling to where. I mean, all these games are not close to Grayson County. There's going to be a little bit of driving going on, and it's the day after Thanksgiving, so there's going to be a lot of traffic. So be safe going to whatever games you're going to, and hopefully we have some good stuff to talk about next week on the podcast. Again, you can follow me on X. At Jason Del Rosa to get updates, find out the winners, the pairings for next week as you try to plan where you're going to go. Should a team advance? Read the stories on our Facebook at either Herald Democrat or the All-Texomaland page. The All-Texomaland page is just for high school sports stuff, whereas the Herald Democrat obviously is everything that we do. So feel free to follow that stuff, and then check back in next week for another edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.